It looks like we finally have some news when it comes to the offensive line.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. As you can see, we are in finally the new studio here. Had a couple days off, big move. We are here. We are finally in the new studio. It looks great, feels great. We're bringing you Kansas State Wildcats coverage every single day, all the way through week 0, through the college football season and beyond. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we are just killing it on the audio side. So thank you once again for being an everydayer. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today, I want to talk about the offensive line, and there's so much to talk about because we really haven't had a chance to talk about media days that happened last week since we've had a discussion here on Locked On Kansas State. So we're going to dive into it. We have plenty of time to do that, although time is ticking away to week 0 to Dublin. Monday through Thursday, we're going to catch up talking media days. And on Fridays, of course, we'll still give you our Farmageddon Friday with Nick Maravitz. We're going to continue the positional groups this week. We got so much more to talk about all the way up until Dublin on August 23rd. There is plenty of discussion, but I wanted to start with what I thought was probably one of the most leading narratives of either from the positions, from the players, I should say, from Coach Kleiman, from other coaches, just the vibe that I got from not only my friends, hosts that were at Frisco in the media days. I did not go down to Frisco this year. As you can see, I did a crazy move, but just from everything. So I want to get into that. And the biggest thing was that Kansas State has found its new starting left tackle. So it seems that they have found their new starting left tackle, and that is Ohio State transfer in George Fitzpatrick. Chris Kleiman could not stop talking about how good George Fitzpatrick was. And that's exciting. And we kind of already had an idea of how great he felt about him from the buzz we heard about him in spring when he came over in the transfer portal, in the early portal window. In the wintertime, he had the chance to obviously participate in the spring. People were talking about how he was already acclimating great, how because he was playing into the college football playoffs, so he didn't really have any time off, went right into spring with Kansas State, so he was in great shape, and he just continued on from there. In his opening press conference, Coach Kleiman said that he has worked himself up already to the starting left tackle on the depth chart. That is high praise coming from a player who, yes, came from a national championship caliber program in Ohio State, but has only been with Kansas State for, 10 practices in the spring? Because remember, that spring practices were shortened. They won't focus on the strength and conditioning side on the beginning half before hitting those actual practices and meetings and whatnot. Has worked himself up to the starting left tackle on the depth chart. Huge words coming from Coach Kleiman right off the bat. I mean, in his first, 5-10 minutes being on the podium before anybody else could say, this wasn't from his breakout sessions. This wasn't from any of the one-on-ones from some of the other Kansas State media folks that we saw at media days who had great coverage, by the way. Awesome coverage. No, this was from his press conference, the official one. You can find it on the Big 12 YouTube page on ESPN Plus in the archives. It is right there. It is exciting. George Fitzpatrick seems like to be the guy. And what else I really liked about it was that he didn't just talk about George Fitzpatrick. He didn't even lead off with him, but that's just the one that really caught my attention. He talked about some of the other returning players, which I want to get to in just a second, talk about the rest of the offensive line. We'll do that in the second segment. But he talked about some of those. He talked about some returnings, and he also talked about the other transfers that came over. Some of them mostly came in the spring window, like J.B. Nelson and Tarrence Enos. And he talks about his excitement, how he thinks that they're going to make a big impact right away. He also brought up the fact of how he feels like they're going to play a lot more with the offensive line, which is exciting because he feels the depth is there. So much excitement around the offensive line and the entire offense from the media days last week. And this is exactly what we thought. This is the same feeling we have had all offseason. This offense is going to be so much better. Yes, there's going to be probably some question marks about the defense. We can talk about that in a later episode because there's going to be plenty of time to do so. But let's get excited about this offense. I think we have every right to do so. And I know some people are gun shy about transfers, especially in the wide receiver room. We're not talking about wide receivers today, but at least have that notion. It's easy to be gun shy about some of these transfers. But when you have a guy who played all 16 games, yes, as a reserve offensive lineman, but all 16 games for a national championship college football team in Ohio State, a team that was very good last year. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind if you were a college football fan and watch more football than just Kansas State football could tell you that. But now you're bringing him in. He hasn't missed a single step, hit the ground running, if you will. And now you're seeing him become the starting left tackle. Hopefully that sticks into fall camp. Hopefully that means he only gets stronger. And hopefully we get more of a better idea of where every other position lies before we get to week 0. Because there's only a few weeks of fall camp before they head in that plane ride across the pond to get to Dublin. And Coach Kleiman made the joke of how he's getting a week less of vacation, but that's true. They're starting a week earlier because of fall camp because they start a week earlier in week 0 for football. So having a guy like George Fitzpatrick, who is hitting the ground running, right? Not really missing a step. The only time he's had off is after spring practice, really. He went right from the national championship from the portal to Kansas State and went right to spring practice, right to those strength trainings, got all that buzz. We heard about it. We had an episode in the past when he just transferred. You can check that out. I believe it was from January, where we talked about George Fitzpatrick and how he is already becoming a name to pay attention to for Kansas State. And it sounds like we were right. It sounds like he is going to be the left tackle for Kansas State, one of the most important positions on the offensive line for Avery Johnson in his junior season. Lots to be excited about for just George Fitzpatrick. And not just him, though, for the rest of this offensive line. Because now that we have that potentially solidified, coming from Coach Kleiman, so you have to think that's obviously where it's at. Obviously, things can change, but as of right now, it sounds like we have Fitzpatrick as our starting left tackle. What does that mean for everyone else? Because there are plenty of names to fill those other 4 spots on the offensive line. Let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But before we do so, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about the baseball under the lights, like that home run derby we had, I don't know if you can see, but I got a Mariners helmet behind me. Big fan of the Mariners. And Cal Riley did his thing the other night. FanDuel is the best way to get in on the action and make the game more exciting. You're already following that action, so why make it a little more thrilling, right? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game with your friends and get sunburnt instead of them being sunburnt at the beach. You could be enjoying that all-star game that happened just last night. Crazy all-star game. Went to a home run, an ending. It was just wild. And what was wild is I saw a tweet that some of the main players already left. Like some of the starters were on a plane ride home, so they didn't even get to join in the extra inning festivities. Who would have guessed that? Well, I'm not sure. But with FanDuel, you could have had the prediction that they would have went to that extra innings or whatever the case may have been, or over under on the score for the All-Star game. I've been using FanDuel for a very long time. I use it to track my favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh. I love the interface. And now it's got this new daily promotions. It's a very fun way to bet. So whether I'm placing that same game parlay or watching a bet to ride in the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it easy to feel like I'm part of the action. And that's exactly what you need when you get to the dog days of summer and now the second half of the baseball season. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Getting used to the studio still, so if you hear a couple extra ums and ahs, my screens are in different places than it was. So just still getting comfortable here. This is our first episode back, so I'll get back in the fit of things. So hang with me. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, we're trying to get back to 1,000 subscribers before the end of July. We are very close. I think we'll probably hit it by the end of the week. That's how great you are as everydayers. And once again, thank you so much for sticking with us here at Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. And talking about the offensive line today, George Fitzpatrick was, named the starting left tackle at media days in the best way possible, right? Coming from Chris Kleiman at the podium and his main press conference, someone asked him a question about the offensive line, and he was one of the first names that came up. But it wasn't the first name. Some of the other names that popped up were some returning starters from Kansas State. And the first one that came up was Sam Heck. And I think that was absolutely the right call for Coach Kleiman because he was once again overpassed for a preseason All-American bid. And I think he's the best center in the Big 12, maybe even one of the best centers in college football. So it's safe to say that Heck is going to be the starting center for Kansas State this year. I think we can probably put that one in pen. I would put Fitzpatrick in pencil, erasable pen. They still make those these days. I remember getting those as a middle schooler and thinking that was like the coolest thing in the world until you looked at the back of your hand. Anyways, so we got two offensive linemen already at that positions, right? Center and left tackle. Then you have, I think, some question marks. I think you have the potential of what will happen next. Who will be the rest of the offensive line for Kansas State, at least to start week 0 against Iowa State? When we had our positional group conversation with Nick Maravitz at Farmageddon Friday a few weeks ago, I said the best problem to have right now is Kansas State's offensive line. I said the fact that we don't really know who is going to be on that offensive line starting in week 0 is not a bad thing. It's probably the best problem to have because there's so much depth. Almost the fact where you can have a first and second string at every position, like almost, I would say, very close to being 10 deep. Now, Coach Kleiman did say he's going to play a lot more with the offensive line. I don't think you're going to see full 5 in and 5 out or anything like that. But the fact that you are going to have multiple players that can come in and give a player a couple plays off or potentially a drive off to keep everybody fresh in this new era of college football where you only have probably 107, 108 players on the roster and soon be 105 next season, you got to get creative. And if you're trying to make a deep run into the college football playoffs, which of course Kansas State's trying to do, you must be creative because if you can make a deep run in the college football playoffs this year, there's not many other teams, if any, unless you see Iowa State somehow make it there too, who are going to have a season as long as Kansas State's having. You're starting week 0. And you're hoping to get to the national championship game. No other team. Oh, and you're starting a week early in fall camp. No other team is going to be doing that if you can make it that far. So when you talk about depth and you talk about longevity of players and hoping injuries don't creep up to you towards the end of the season, towards October, then you need to get creative. And the offensive line is a great spot to do that in the trenches. You have Langang, who I think is going to be the biggest question mark. He will be on the offensive line, but where? And I think that is going to be the domino that needs to fall for Kansas State. Where did they decide to put Langang? If they decide to put him at guard, then maybe they feel a little bit more better about potentially Pastore, who had some injuries in 2024, was set to be in the rotation or starting offensive lineman last year. Chris Kleiman brought him up at media days as well. Maybe they feel like he can hop back into that right tackle spot. Or do they feel like he can move out the tackle, Langang, and then you put in the Penn State product, the all Big Ten honorable mention in one point in his career in J.B. Nelson at right guard? A lot of questions that you can do here. You obviously got Taylor Potier at the other guard, who's entering his 7th season. Chris Kleiman made a joke about it in his breakout at Big 12, saying, reminding us that he is in his original recruiting class He's been with Kansas State for his 7th year. That's how long Chris Kleiman's been here. So you got to assume he's going to be most likely on the starting line. He was at media days as well. Maybe JB Nelson beats him out eventually if they decide to keep Langang at guard. There's a lot of questions that we're going to be able to find out at fall camp of what goes on with this offensive line. As of right now, it sounds like we have 2 solid players that will be in their positions with Heck and potentially Fitzpatrick. Then I think you'll have Langang somewhere. And that's it. I would assume Potier. But we'll see what JB Nelson can do. We'll see what John Pastore can do. Right? And then there's still Tarrence Enos. There's still Amos Talele. All of these names popping up and gets you excited about the depth. And it makes you forget about what happened with the Brandon Snee transfer, really blunder, where he came in the winter and transferred out in the spring. It didn't work out. Wasn't a big deal. I potentially thought he could be a starting tackle. It didn't work. And it sounds like it's not needed when you look at some of these other players on the roster. If they think he didn't fit, then if you're looking at all the other guys that are here right now, he's probably at the bottom of that rotation. That's probably why he decided to transfer out and find himself elsewhere. A lot of things to be excited about on this offensive line. Who do you think will be the starting offensive line from left tackle to right tackle week 0 in Iowa State? Let me know in the comment description below. And if you're listening on audio, you can send me a tweet at Locked On K-State. I'll put a tweet out this morning and you can comment on it. Give me your thoughts because I really want to know, because I'm curious actually. Here's my prediction. I'm going to go with this one. And you can let me know if you agree or disagree. I think that's a fair assessment. And I want to know why you disagree. Like, who would you take out and who would you put in and why? Because this is going to be a fun project because I'm going to pay very close attention to the offensive line in fall camp. It's probably going to be the second most important position group that I pay attention to in the offense. I can't lie to you. I'm going to be glued to the wide receivers. I'm going to be glued to the wide receivers in fall camp. But I'm going this. Left tackle, I'm going George Fitzpatrick. I think it just, got to listen to coach here. Then I'm going to go with Potier. I think he's going to sit at left guard. I think he's going to do that. You got Heck at center. I think JB Nelson's going to be that right guard. I think he's going to be too good to keep off the field. And I think that's going to push Langang to right tackle. That means you got guys like Enos and Pastore who are just itching to rotate in. If Talele can make that step up to where he needs to be as an interior offensive lineman, he could rotate in as well. I mean, that's a really solid 8-man lineup right there. That's really solid. And I might even be missing somebody off the top of my head. And if I am missing somebody, let me know. But, man, there's a lot of things to be pumped about when it comes to this offensive line. And I don't have the roster up right now, so there's a really good chance that I'm missing somebody that I didn't bring up, but maybe not. But that's what I'm going to go with. You let me know your thoughts in the comment description below. Let's finish today's show with more offensive line talk, but let's get into 2026, guys. There's some new updates from some of the guys that have already committed, and just want to make sure we get that covered on this show because, hey, there was some recruiting losses, some transfer portal losses that we had over the past weekend in a different position group, and just probably a better way to get a better taste in our mouth as we get to the rest of the week here on Locked On Kansas State. And welcome back to the show, Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats, bringing you Kansas State Wildcats coverage like no one else every single day. And we are going to be here in this nice new studio, breaking it down all the way up through Dublin, through the college football season, all the way till college basketball. We got plenty of college basketball talk. I mean, on both sides, right? Got extensions. We got more portal chatter. There's lots to talk about. We'll be getting into that in the next few weeks. There's just so much football to talk about. That's, of course, what's on everybody's mind. And we're getting into catching up on the media day talk. And today we're talking offensive line. George Fitzpatrick, the new starting left tackle, according to Coach Kleiman. What's going to be the rest of the offensive line heading into week 0? We tried to answer that, and I want to hear your thoughts. So let me know. But I want to dig into a little, I guess you could call it fun conversation when it comes to the 2026 class. And really, it's the two Texas offensive linemen that I want to get into. This is an offensive line episode, just kind of throwing it all together here. But On3 went in, did a merge with Rivals. I'm sure you saw that. If you didn't, now On3 and Rivals is just one. And Rivals now has the industry the ranking, right? It's no longer an On3 ranking. It's Rivals, and On3 have the Rivals ranking now. So you got Rivals, you got 24/7, and you have ESPN as really the three when you look at the rankings across the board of a recruit. Well, according to Rivals now, we see that Justin Morales has moved up to a 4-star. He is now a 4-star recruit. According to Rivals, moves him up to a 90. Now, 24/7 still has him as an 87, a 3-star, and ESPN has him as a 78, a 3-star. I will say this, ESPN is always off. I don't know what it is. Every time I look at recruiting rankings, I really only pay attention to now Rivals and 24/7. I used to pay attention to On3 Rivals 24/7, but now that, as I mentioned, they merged. ESPN is always like the afterthought. If it's on the screen, I'll mention it, but I'm not going to their page to talk recruiting rankings, at least not for football. In basketball, especially women's basketball, they're pretty good. But when it comes to college football, I don't know. They just don't scratch the surface for me. But either way, Justin Morales, the tackle, the offensive lineman from El Paso, Texas, big kid, going to be exciting kid, 6'4", 250, according to his Rivals program or profile, is now a 4-star recruit. And according to Rivals, he is the 24th interior offensive lineman. I said tackle earlier. They call him an interior offensive lineman. The 24th in the, looks like the state of Texas. Excuse me. No, I'm looking at this wrong. He is the 43rd player overall in the state of Texas. That's pretty good. And the 24th overall interior offensive lineman in the country. So pretty exciting with that. Now, he's not ranked nationally, but that's okay. We don't need to worry about that. And I'm not really a big guy on talking about stars here. As you know, I'm more about fit than numbers because this becomes political after they commit. We've seen plenty of 3-stars randomly become high 4-stars when they commit to Alabama, right? We've seen that before. But it's nice to see an extra star come to Manhattan. So kudos to Justin Morales. A lot of exciting things happening for that young man. On the flip side, the other offensive lineman that joined on the same weekend from Texas as well, Keegan Collins. Yes, he's still a 3-star. He didn't get bumped up, but he's right there. The Rivals ranking have him at an 88. He's right behind it. He's considered a high 3-star if you really want to consider it. But the Amarillo product, 6'5", 280, it looks like he's put out even more weight. He put out a tweet just the other day at 290 pounds. On the scale, 290 even. And this was on July 12th. And he said, big off season coming to an end. I have put on almost 20 pounds of muscle. Gotta love that from a guy like Keegan Collins, who will be in the 2026 class, ready to roll for Kansas State after this season. You got all these older offensive linemen. That was a main focus for Chris Kleiman and his recruiting staff this transfer portal. He even talked about it at Big 12 Media Days, how he wanted to make sure he got some younger or older guys in the building for these younger guys. Now you're seeing players like Keegan Collins, who still have another year in high school before they even get to Manhattan, doing the right things, getting ready to go. Sounds like they're paying attention to their nutrition, their weight training. He's going to be ready for K-State. That's exciting stuff. So really good things happening on the recruiting trail as well for Kansas State. Good things happening at Big 12 Media Days for Kansas State. And it's all that momentum train that keeps going up, folks, that's going to get us right to Dublin and find ourselves back in Texas, but this time just in Arlington when it comes to the Big 12 championship. That will happen. We're going to continue to say that. We're going to manifest it. It's going to definitely happen here in the coming weeks when the season comes to an end. That's going to wrap it up here for Locked On Kansas State. Thank you so much for making this your first listen. For your second listen, check out the portal. Brian Smith has you covered, talking more recruiting than we just did in this third segment. He's talking about recruiting across college football, the transfer portal, you name it. He is busy. If there's a signing, he's covering it. And he's talking about every single team you could think of in the FBS. He's got you covered. Check that out for your second listen of the day. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.